It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, April 26th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is bringing you the Flyers season in review with Jordan Hall from NBC Sports Philly.
It's going to be a jam-packed show.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and I'm a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends, download Monopoly Go for free on the App Store or Google Play. You can find us over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, so we got the news that Joel Farabee will be joining Team USA for Men's Worlds after Travis Konechny said he wasn't going to play for Canada. So we do have like a key Flyers player, at least in the tournament. That's fine.
Yeah, gives everybody something to watch. Certainly, there were people that felt like Farabee had a pretty good year. I did, but again, there were people that felt like he didn't. But no, this is good experience for him.
Yeah, I'm really excited. And it seems like they've got like the development program team band back together a little bit for this one. So I'm excited to see this roster play. Speaking of excitement, the Lehigh Valley Phantoms won game one of their playoff series in Wilkes-Barre Scranton. Could not be more thrilled because it was the road game. And, this means that the Phantoms will have a home game and hopefully be able to close it out.
Yeah, it would be nice. The only thing is, there's this question mark now. Is Kolosov going to play? And I don't think he's going to play. But I know fans really want to see him play, and I get it. I do. There's a part of me in the back of my head that says, all right, I mean, maybe if they were to get past this round, that he would get to play, or is it just going to be Cal Peterson's show, which then kind of I have to admit, it hits me funny. It does.
Yeah, it's tough because you want to kind of go with the known entity, especially you want to get the skaters as many playoff games as possible. And if you feel like Peterson is the guy that can get you there, maybe that's what you go with. So it's a tough decision. I do understand that.
I just feel like Sandstrom's not in the decision, and I feel bad about that.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely the case. Game 2 is tonight in Lehigh Valley, so very excited for the fans there. The U18s, USA was pretty dominant in their game, won 9-0. Cole Eiserman had a hat trick. Jamie Higgins and Teddy Stiga got on the board. A real good start for Team USA.
Yeah, Higgins is right at the top of the draft next year, so we don't worry about him too much. People could nitpick about Cole Eiserman; he's going to keep scoring. So I don't nitpick as much as others. I loved what Stiga did. I think some people are starting to catch on. Loved what Brody, what Brody Zemer did. I thought he had a really good game. So yeah, really good effort.
Canada won their first game over Sweden. Finland won over Latvia as well. And Kivijarhu got on the board for this one with an assist.
Yeah, if he has a big series, again, a couple of years ago, he was thought to be a top 5, top 10 pick. And he also, then he got an injury this year. Nobody really knows what it was, but he was out for 4 months. If he catches on, he's going to start shooting up the charts. I wrote something on my site, NHLDraftBuzz.com, and people could check it out. But yeah, he's an exciting player, especially on the power play.
Yeah, link to that article in the show notes. But we want to get to our conversation with Jordan Hall as quickly as possible here. Lots to talk about. It's a little bit of an extended episode because of that. But we thought it was such a great conversation. We want to bring you all of that. So we'll talk to Jordan right now. We are thrilled to welcome back to Locked On Flyers, Jordan Hall from NBC Sports Philly to help us wrap up the season that was for the Flyers. How are you doing, Jordan?
I'm doing well, Rachel. Thanks so much for having me. It's always great to see you both and talk a little Flyers hockey for sure.
Always fun.
So I think like the big overarching question coming out of this season, given everything, is can you call this season a success for the Flyers?
I think you can. That was my feeling after the dust settled from that collapse, and we knew for good that the Flyers were eliminated from the playoff race, final day of the regular season. I think when you take a couple days and you really look at the big picture, you realize that they wanted to get better this year. They were not trying to get worse, and if they had gotten worse, I think that would have been more troubling than them missing the playoffs on the final day. And I say that because they have a lot of younger players, a lot of inexperience. So on the final day of the regular season, they had 13 players with no playoff experience on the roster. They had 14 players that were 25 or younger. So they believed, I think, in some of the ingredients they have here, and they didn't think they would make the playoffs, but they were hoping to get better. And if they had gotten worse, then I really would have questioned, gosh, did they not? They don't have the young talent that I think they thought they had. So the fact that they got better and made a 12-point jump, I thought they got a lot of answers. Certainly some big questions, and I don't think you can just sweep the 8-game collapse under the rug. That had concerns, but big picture, I think what they saw from their younger players, career years across the board for a lot of guys. I think a lot of younger players realized their roles. I think they started to tap into their upside, and I think there's still more upside to reach. I think that outweighs the 8-game collapse and some of the questions that came with it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Also, though, I will say that a lot of times teams have up and down seasons. Like the Devils made the playoffs the year before, they didn't make it this year. I mean, it's possible the Flyers could lose points in the standings, but improve on development. Like that could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Russ, I couldn't agree more with that. I think like you will see that at times. I really am curious to see what the expectations will be for the Flyers next season in-house and also publicly within the fan base, because there's going to be people that think, well, they went to the final day of the regular season in a playoff race. The next step, in theory, should be playoffs. But I think the Flyers in-house are going to be thinking more long-term still. That's the vibe I got with their exit interviews. I think when they say they have a far way to go, they're saying end goal of being a contender year in and year out. They're not
Okay.
saying playoffs. Maybe they make the playoffs, but there's a good chance they don't do anything in the playoffs because they're still in the big picture trying to achieve long-term contention year in and year out. And that I think is the end goal. That's where they ultimately want to get to. So yeah, Russ, I'm very curious as to see if they take a step back, but they still see development. Will they consider that, victories, even though they're picking up more losses than maybe they did this season?
Right. Now, the Flyers have a plethora or a gaggle of goalies, I would say, and most have a 2-year deal. The only thing is now, though, with the Fedotov contract, you have basically maybe given Sam Ersson a little to worry about. I know everybody's going to say, well, he's going to do the right job, whatever, but like Sam Ersson is now walking into the year making $2 million less. If Sam Ersson does happen to wrestle away the number one job, um, what do you feel about the goalie structure? And do you think now that they've artificially inflated Urson's contract for when he's an RFA, if all goes to plan?
That's a great point. I was thinking of Samuel Ersson when I saw the AAV for Ivan Fedotov because I knew it
Yeah.
was significantly more than Samuel Ersson, and Ersson's such a good kid. I think you guys know, and you've been
Oh
around him
yeah,
up close like I have. He's such a good person and so even keeled, level headed. I don't think it's going to bother him all that much. But I do wonder if he maybe saw it and thought, well, I have way more experience here at the NHL level, at the AHL level, and I'm making much less. But I don't think it's going to bother him all that much. But it will be very interesting to see after his deal expires what he could earn and how they're going to compare it to what Fedotov makes now. But I wasn't all that worried about Fedotov's deal. I know some people, it raised a lot of eyebrows given he has very, very little experience here, but he's very accomplished at the KHL level. He's been great in international competition. He has a silver medal from the Olympics. And I think the Flyers probably had to do a lot to get him over here. And perhaps that played into it, that they knew they would need to give him some more dollars. And I think the positive is they're not committing too much long term without knowing what he is yet. I think this gives them 2 years to really get a read on him, if he's gonna make it in the NHL, or if he's not meant for the NHL, and then they can make a decision after that. But it will be very interesting to see how it affects Samuel Ersson, and I'm just curious to see if Fedotov can spell him enough. We saw what happened when Ersson played too much. He seemed
Yeah.
like he was at his best when he was playing every other game with Carter Hart. Can Fedotov prove to be the guy that can spell him enough and keep him at a good games limit? And can those two work together in tandem? It's the biggest question in my eyes in terms of position groups going into next year's goaltending. I don't think they got enough goaltending down the stretch. And here they want to go with two guys that are still relatively inexperienced. How will that affect their season and their goals? I think it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I think that one of the most intriguing parts of all of this to me is that both of those goaltender contracts expire the year they expect Mitchkov to join the team.
Hmm.
And how is that timing going to affect everything for this team when both of your ostensible like 1A or 1B or 1 and 2 goaltenders like could be asking for a ton of money at the same time when your superstar is supposed to join the team. Like that is going to be a very interesting time for the Flyers, in my opinion. We'll be back with more conversation with Jordan Hall coming up next. When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could handpick the best stars for your business team? If you're building your talent roster, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessments, and virtual interviews. Hate waiting? Indeed's US data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. With Indeed, matching as soon as you sponsor a post, you'll get a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. Boom, it's hiring at warp speed. Now with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that meet your hiring criteria. Visit Indeed.com/locked on to start hiring now. That's Indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. One of the things you mentioned in your like recap of how you thought the season went, Jordan, was talking a little bit about that collapse toward the end of the season. And, despite that, everything, um, despite that, it was a good season. And I agree with that. But I wonder, like, what do you think led to that? Because we've talked a lot about that on the show. And do you think it's fixable moving forward?
I think when a team loses 8 in a row, there's definitely a number of factors, a number of things that factored into it, and I think that was the case here with the Flyers. It was kinda like a perfect storm. One of the biggest things that really just caught my eye that was that John Tortorella couldn't get answers, and I thought that was the most desperate I've seen John Tortorella in my 2 years covering him. He even admitted publicly that he was wondering about his message. Was he giving them the right message at the right time? And why wasn't it really kind of clicking and getting them to stop the skid? They had, this season they had for the most part been able to prevent skids from going past 5, and this one just ballooned to 8. And something that really caught my attention was when he ripped into the team. He ripped into the team after that 5th loss. It was an overtime loss to the Islanders, and he called them soft for that second period. He said it was embarrassing for that second period. But the team had responded pretty well in the 3rd period. They
Right.
outplayed New York pretty
Yeah.
substantially. They got a point, and maybe they felt like, well, heck, we did fight down to the final second and stole a point, and maybe we can build on that a little bit. And here's the coach ripping them. And what happened after that? They got blown out in their next 3 games. They were outscored 19-7, and suddenly this losing streak was at 8 games, and everyone's wondering what the heck happened, and they were in desperation mode at that point. So Tortorella does not regret doing that. He said he wouldn't change it, but it's very fair to question how did the team respond to that because the
Well,
results were ugly.
here's something else that dovetails with that. He said that he wouldn't change the way he handled Sean Couturier too. And there is a thing called load management. Other teams in the NHL do it. The NBA uses it a lot.
Yeah.
And he doubled down on that. And he wanted us, all of us, to believe that Sean would be mad for any games that he was going to be rested because of, wanting him to play the whole season. I had a hard time buying that. I think he was madder when he was benched that second game than he would be otherwise.
And if they're worried about Couturier being mad, I mean, they've already ticked him off a couple of times before that.
Right.
They
Right.
shut him down the year before that when he was itching to play
Correct.
games, and Tortorella admitted, he's like, "Hey, Couturier's ticked off, and I love it. I love that he's competitive and wants to play, but we don't think he should play this year. We're focused on next season." So, yeah, you can't really use that as an excuse as to, we didn't want to watch his minutes because we thought he'd be furious then. No, I'm with you, Russ. I think they could have, Tortorella said, I don't have a crystal ball, but they can absolutely plan.
Yeah.
for the
Cam
long-
Atkinson too. Same thing. Same
Right.
situation.
Right. They can plan for the long haul of a season and understand this guy had not played in 22 months and that playing him 19 to 20 minutes a night while he was playing well, it might come back to bite him down the stretch. And yeah, it looks like he hit a bit of a wall and perhaps the Flyers could have helped him better. I think that's a very fair point. But as far as the other factors, I think one was Tortorella not being able to connect with his team at that point
Yeah.
and get them out of it. And then also, I just don't think they got saves. I think that was a concerning thing. I think Samuel Ersson was tired and he was not giving them saves early in games. And then they had Ivan Fedotov try to play, a guy that just got here from Russia. Wasn't probably in the best situation to
No.
play in a playoff race. They finished tied for last in save percentage this season. I just don't think they got saves, whereas they were earlier in the season. And then,
Well, the defense was tired too. Like,
and
to
the
be
defense
fair.
was fired. Absolutely, Russ. They did not get the defending that they got earlier in the season, and then they couldn't score. But they outshot their opponents in all 8 of those games. All 8 of those losses, they outshot the opponent. I know sometimes that's a byproduct of a team trying to come back and push, but still, you would think if you're out shooting your opponent in every game, you're probably just not getting enough saves. And I think their goaltending situation kind of reared its ugly head a little bit. They missed Carter Hart, and they had 2 rookies in net, and that kind of led to a losing streak ballooning to 8 games and kind of that perfect storm at the worst possible time.
Yeah, I think it's real interesting because I think the other factor there is, well, first off, everybody was tired. It wasn't just the defense, but I
Mhm.
think, the lack of scoring, you say, well, what is going on there? The Flyers had a pretty consistent shooting problem all season long.
Yeah.
And I think that it just kind of ballooned and manifested itself a lot more in that streak, especially because of the other factors piled on top of it. And it's something we've talked about all season, with
No, for
their
2 years. For 2
oh,
years,
yeah.
really.
Yeah, their shooting percentage is super low, and I haven't heard them address that as much as I might have liked. But what do you think about how they've addressed that issue?
It's a great point. I really think its talent deficiency was kind of we've talked ad nauseum about the Flyers' talent deficiency, and I just think we saw it down the stretch. They scored by committee. I mean, Travis Konecny is their leading goal scorer, and he had a career year, and he was struggling during that stretch. And I don't, it's fair to wonder, like, he's not really even a 40 goal scorer. You see a lot of guys that have 20 to 30 goal potential, but we saw, I think, confidence issues down the stretch. I think we saw a team pressing, and they were not a high-end scoring team to begin with. So when you couple those factors, pressing and then also not being a top-end scoring team, I think we saw a team really fight to score. And I think they still need to address scoring without a doubt, Rachel,
Well,
in the offseason and with draft and development. They just don't have enough guys that can beat the goalie without help. We thought Tyson Forster would be that, and he scored 20 goals, but he really fought it at times. So that just kind of speaks to, I think, their talent deficiency and how some way, somehow, they need to address that.
Well, Jordan, really for 2 years, especially with players like Tippett and York, I've been saying, why don't they hire or send them to a shooting coach? Claude
Mm.
Giroux went to one, and he ended up becoming a really good goal scorer when the team needed him to score goals. They didn't need him to score goals early on. All I remember John saying once this whole year was, oh, yeah, there's a sign up sheet and you could sign up for it and work with the skills coach. But a skills coach isn't a shooting coach. Like this team, this organization has plenty of money. If they just put a little bit of money into shooting and actually had the players working with somebody who's pretty experienced with that, I think you would see some results. That's
Yeah,
just me.
that's fair. That's fair. I think they can invest some resources in that. They have, I know Keith Jones said before this season that he was just kind of in, he didn't use these words, but he was kind of in awe at the resources that they had. They said
Mhm.
they are given the money, the team is willing to spend, that ownership was backing it, and that they felt their resources would help them get better. And perhaps that's something they can look into, for sure. I know player development is something that they're working at. And yeah, I think really dealing with a shooting coach can help because like I think Owen Tippett he was up there, I think, in shot attempts this year.
Oh, yeah, he was.
You feel like if he can continue to work on getting those shots on net and beating the goalie, he's a 28 goal guy. Gosh, where could he go? Maybe 35
Right.
to 40.
Yeah.
And it can probably help with their power play too.
Well, we're going to get to that right now because
they're
I haven't run into Flyers fans. I went to a Flyers fan club meeting a week ago. I haven't run into any fans that haven't asked me about the power play and Rocky Thompson, possibly getting fired, right? And I did have to try and warn people that there was a chance he was going to stay. Now, I think this is a very tough sell for John to try and sell the fan base or anybody in the media, anybody with eyes. His only answer right now was, well, we're all going to collaborate and we'll get Danny Heatley involved. Okay, great. But the idea is, I know it's easy to say, well, there's not enough talent. I looked at other teams. San Jose had a better power play, a lot better power play. Montreal did. So there are teams that, I think are right there with the Flyers or maybe even a little under with talent that didn't come through. And I'm just the fact that Rocky Thompson's still there kind of leaves me questioning, is John just not getting rid of him because he's loyal to him?
What I liked of what Tortorella said was that in the past, I feel like we've seen so many people pin it on personnel. Even people that worked for the Flyers pinned it on, well, we don't have the personnel yet. We're trying to draft and develop people to help us in those areas. Tortorella owned up to it. He did not pin it just on personnel. And he said, listen, it can't be as bad as it was with the people we had on the power play. And I agree with him. Here's Owen Tippett that's being touted as one of the faster players in the league. Tyson Forster's been highly regarded for his shot. It's one of the best shots in the organization.
I mean, Morgan Frost is great at zone entries, and he got used maybe a quarter of the time on that.
Yeah. Cam York has been touted as his power play quarterback, a guy that we think is going to quarterback our power play. And there was times where everything was just a mess. So you could not have that type of talent on the power play. And sure, they can get more talent.
And
but
Drysdale never even had a chance to sort of be himself on the power play either.
That too. That's a great point. Jamie Drysdale got here, and you would think power play quarterback, and it didn't really improve things. So, yeah, a part of it has to fall on Rocky Thompson's shoulders. But I think they also realize he does a lot of other things well. I think they like that he works with their forwards. I think a lot of times he's kind of the good cop in the situation of Tortorella can be really tough on the players, and Thompson really deals with them as an assistant coach where he's positive and he works well with them and they like him in that regard. But
that's why we wonder why they didn't, or they haven't said they're going to just change his role, have him do the things well that he does well and bring in somebody else to do the power play.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's a scenario that's eventually going to arrive. I don't think it's going to arrive before the start of the season, but them saying that they want to collaborate more and get many more voices, more hands in the, more kitchens, or
but it's all inside. All these people were there this year to watch it all fail. Yeah. So to me, it's like, you got to go outside for this. Everybody inside has been watching this fail, and I'm sure had suggestions. I can't believe nobody would have a suggestion all year to tell the coaching staff, hey, why not this or what? I'm sure they did.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of something hard to do in season.
Okay.
They always talk about it's so hard to practice on these things. Like I know they practice power play a lot, but it's tough to get, I think, everyone in one room. And like, obviously, a lot of these guys are traveling, and the middle of the season is such a grind that like you probably find it difficult to even sit down and talk and really get through X's and O's.
We'll wrap up our conversation with Jordan Hall talking about the future for the Flyers going into next season. We'll do that coming up next.
We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's the second period break and the scoreboard's not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure if your team can pull out a win. Then that's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right, the smash hit mobile game, Monopoly Go, lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone. Anytime, with a ton of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge other players for rent for iconic properties. You could even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournament to get extra rewards to climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Well, all right. So let me ask you this then, because I've wondered this, towards the end of the season, not because of the NHLPA. A lot of times John was just kind of like, all right, I'm not practicing them. I'm giving them the day off. And my feeling was, why don't you call them in for a half hour to do film study?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think probably on the days they didn't get on the ice, they probably did do a lot of film and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a huge question. I think everything needs to be questioned. And them saying how much they want to collaborate tells me maybe they will go into the season with Rocky Thompson. But if things don't improve, I would think they're going to think about making a change there. So I really think the pressure is on Rocky Thompson to get some results here. But I feel for him. I don't think it's all on him either.
No, but I would say it's 80% because it's his job title. Like that's
Yeah.
it.
No, and he's had 2 years now at it, and they feel like they have younger talent kind of matriculating through the system and now on the Flyers, and they probably want to see results. But the year before Thompson arrived, it was 12.6. It was last in the league. This
Right.
year is 12.2. So it hasn't gotten better, but
I have to laugh. There's nothing else you can
but
do.
it was
Yeah.
pretty damn bad before he got here too. It's been an issue. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think eventually it falls on the coach's shoulders, and it's something they could address if things do not get better early in the season.
One of the other issues that we've talked about, and it kind of relates to the power play as well, is how they use the guys from Lehigh Valley and the communication between the two teams, which seemed to be little to none based on what both guys said, based on what Tortorella said, and based on what Ian LePerriere has said. We have talked about maybe putting Ronnie Attard on the power play because that's something he does very well at the AHL level. They never did that. But I just think in terms of the guys that did get called up, how do you feel about how all that worked and if they got a true shot?
I definitely think they can form the relationship better between the AHL team and the NHL team. They were trying to do that with LePerriere and Vigneault, and then when Tortorella came, it just seems like that kind of got put to the side, and that's pretty important. I
Well,
mean,
he disconnected it, I think, by saying he could do his own thing. He doesn't have to run my system. And we
r-
all looked at it like, but every other team wants to run the same system.
yeah, and I think there should be a balance there of yes, don't overstep too much and let LePerriere run his team the way he thinks. There should be a goal down there of winning, but you cannot lose sight of the development factor and making sure these guys are prepared to play for John Tortorella. And Tortorella joked a lot that not joked, but he said like, yeah, listen, I don't talk to Lappy all that much. From time to time I do. And perhaps, Danny Briere and some other folks are probably communicating much more with Ian LePerriere and the folks down there. And that's where the relationship stays strong. But yeah, I think that's a little bit of a concern. And I think it's something they can do better because there are a lot of young players down there that are coming up. I mean, this is a rebuild, and they're going to be having a lot of players play for Lehigh Valley and eventually get up here. And they had a lot of guys kind of come up here during the season, and they needed help from those players. So I think that's something they can absolutely focus on in the offseason. It definitely caught my attention when it sounded like Tortorella and LaPerriere don't talk all that much. I think it can't hurt to talk a little more often, and I think that falls on Tortorella. I know they're busy. I know they're both busy with their own teams, but you can't disregard that.
No, no doubt. Let me ask you this. Next year the cap goes up. Travis Konechny is going to suck up a fair amount of that cap uppage by getting a longer term deal than I would give him, but getting a long term deal. So looking at the cap a little bit, just from far away, they may retain more salary, they may have more buyouts, these kinds of things. Do you worry that with maybe like one or two small free agent additions, and all of a sudden they don't have room to weaponize the cap to kind of help themselves maybe get a player at the deadline, a younger player in a deal for a team that wants to get out from under from a contract? Does that cross your mind? Because it crosses mine.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear, Russ, about what you have to say. I can't say it's a major concern of mine. I feel like they always find a way to make it happen.
But you're not always going to have an injured player to put on LTIR every year, you know?
That's a good point too. No, that's a very good point. I trust that they had the folks in house that can make it happen and make it work. I think Danny Brière's gotten pretty creative in his time here in order to make things happen with his roster in terms of adding players, being able to get draft picks. I think Barry Hanrahan is kind of their cap guy, and I feel like he's done a pretty good job here with their cap. But I think they're going to have to get creative. But I don't think they've really committed to too many bad contracts. I think they've been able to free themselves up a little bit from contracts that maybe were hurting them. I think there's going to be a buyout option with Cam Atkinson. I think that's just the reality of it, and that can help.
But Ristos is going to be hard to get rid of.
Ristos will be hard. I think what they really need from Risto is he needs to play. He needs to play in order to, one, help the Flyers and also maybe help them trade that contract if they ever want to visit that down the road. If he's not,
Delorier doesn't make a lot of money, but he's either looking like a full-time AHLer or another buyout guy too.
Who's that, Russ?
Nick Delorier.
Yeah. And I think he had a no move these last 2 years, but I believe his contract shifts into no trade protection. I believe. I think it was a 4-year deal, and I think the first 2 years had no move. I'm sorry, I should say no trade. Right. And then I think the next 2 years, I don't believe he has protection. So, but no, I can't say I'm too concerned with the cap, Russ. I think they're going to be able to be creative enough and make things happen to take on players if they want to get a young player in a deal. But I want to hear what you have to say, though, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my worry is like Cal Peterson right now, right? Regardless of what he does, you're either going to buy him out or keep him in the AHL next year, because I think he's making like $4 million next year. It goes down a little. Mm-hmm. Risto, I feel like he does have to play at the start. I don't think there's anybody that's going to take him at the draft or otherwise. Atkinson, honestly, while he is a buyout candidate, by the way Tortorella was speaking, I think he's giving him another chance. And that's going to suck up, what is it, 5.8 on the cap. So when you start looking at that, you're looking at the Hayes retained money. Let's say you're looking at connecting, his extension will be for the year after, but still, you're looking at a couple of free agents. I don't know if they're going to have that much free cap space, because there are some guys that are still RFEs, right, that they have to sign too. So I do kind of wonder at some point when they're going to kind of reach their level with that, because again, and then we have Ryan Johansson. Like, what if he isn't be able to put on the injured list? Are you going to play him, or what are you going to do with that $4 million? That could be the extra cap money right there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with Ryan Johansson. It does not sound like he's going to be playing for the Flyers. I believe Danny Briere said he doesn't feel like he's physically able to play. Ryan Johansson doesn't.
Right,
feel like
today he's not. But what if he says in August, I feel good?
Right. I think he's kind of dictating things a little bit to maybe see if he can get moved somewhere. How the Flyers do it, I am not sure.
That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of things there.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to juggle, without a doubt. But I think their last offseason, they didn't commit too long term to anything. They've had to take on some contracts. Yeah, without a doubt. That's been something they've done. And they in order to kind of facilitate deals and get first round picks. But I can't say it's a major concern of mine. It's not something I've looked too closely at. And I do think there's going to be some avenues to increase flexibility. Danny Briere, to me, I think has earned the trust of being able to be creative and make things happen.
I don't distrust him. I just think it's a even harder job now than last year.
Yeah, I think it'll be a major emphasis for them because it has to be. They've had some contracts that they've had to work around money wise. And it'll be interesting to see where they are when they do eventually want to spend. Will they be able to spend?
Right.
We'll see.
Yeah, I think how this cap situation pans out is going to be an integral part of this off season. But what do you see as like the top few things on the Flyers to-do list for next season?
That's a good one. I thought the two areas of concern for me were really goaltending and power play. I just thought that was probably two of the more important things that kind of hurt them down the stretch. And I mean, if they are a little bit better in terms of save percentage, if they're a little bit better in terms of power play percentage, they're probably a playoff team. So I think those are the two main areas. Now, how do they address it? I'm not sure. But we will see. Those are the two things I'm looking at closely going into next season, is how their goaltending tandem works. Does it work? Is Samuel Ersson a 1A? Is Ivan Fedotov a 1B? Can he prove his worth at the NHL level? And then how in the world do they get the power play going? Do they address it maybe in the offseason with different personnel? Do they have some players in-house that can take different steps? Those are the two areas that I think are on their to-do list. And of course, drafting and developing, I think will be huge. They have to continue to hit on some picks. Cutter Gauthier was a significant loss. He was expected to be a pillar to the rebuild. Can they continue to hit on some picks and try to push this forward by drafting and developing? They've added people to help with player development, like the likes of John LeClaire, Patrick Sharp. Are they going to start to see the rewards of that? They obviously reworked player development with, Nick Schultz and why am I blanking on his name? Not John Riley, obviously. Riley Armstrong. Yes, Riley Armstrong. John Riley used to be in their player development, no longer.
Yes.
But
I see John around. He is with
yeah.
I do see him.
Yeah, Riley Armstrong and Nick Schultz. Are you going to start to see some rewards there? Some of the younger players take bigger strides.
I will tell you this: if you don't want to lose sleep, don't look and see who was drafted after Samu Tuomaala. You're not going to like what you see.
Really? Some guys that probably have already made waves in the league, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And I'm Samu Tuomaala had a nice year, but
it faded though. It faded.
It did.
So that's one of those draft and development things that you're talking about that they kind of have to hit on.
Absolutely. And I think you have to take pride in hitting on picks in the late first round and in the second round in Samu Tuomaala's case.
Yeah.
It can't always be just banking on getting top 10 picks and like cashing in on those. You have to cash in and, on the teens, the late 20s and the second round. I think the really good teams hit on those picks. It's not just luck. It's hitting on those picks, making sure they're developing, and then getting them to your roster and having them make impacts. We'll see if the Flyers can continue to do that, because if they're not ready to spend or make major additions in the free agent market and trade market, it's going to be through drafting, developing, and that's kind of going to have to be something they have to hit on.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to it, but we'll see if any of that comes to pass this off season. Jordan, thanks so much for joining. Where can people find you out there?
Yeah, Rachel and Russ, thanks so much for having me. I always love coming on. Love listening to the podcast, and always love coming on. But yeah, you can find my work at NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com, and you can follow me on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at JHallNBCS.
All right. Once again, thanks to Jordan Hall for joining us on the show. Such a great conversation. Always look forward to hearing his insight on the Flyers. He's in there day in and day out and really understands this team better than a lot of people.
Oh, yeah. He's got a great feel for it. He's great.
That will do it for today's show. We will be back on Monday with our nemesis of the week. We'll look at the Phantoms, playoff status, and so much more. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So if you've got mailbag questions or draft pick thoughts, any of that, you can let us know via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it's also available on the Amazon Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great weekend, everybody.